Hello. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Covenant Health and TSPN Survivor of Suicide Loss Day event, where we are going to have a support group panel discussion. I'm really excited to learn and, really understand the importance of survivor of suicide loss support groups. So I welcome you. It's going to be exciting, and I look forward to hearing all this discussion. First, I just want to start with introductions. My name is Emily Hager. I am the East Regional Director of Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, and I'm just here to facilitate discussions today. PJ Alexander, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm PJ Alexander, and I'm a licensed clinical social work, and so I am also certified in grief work and trauma work, and I have a private practice here in Knoxville. And I started the Knoxville Suicide Griever Support Group way back in 1996. So we meet the second Thursday of every month in my counseling office, and we've just done that for a long time, just independently of any organization or anything. So myself and I have some co-facilitators, including Nancy. So we continue to meet just as a service to the community and those who are in need.
Thank you. Mark Potts, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Potts. I am the clinical director for Peninsula, and I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. But I'm here today as the host of the ComPASS group, which is a support group for people who have lost someone to suicide. And Covenant Health Peninsula has offered that to the community since 2017 as a free resource. It's a monthly meeting, the second Tuesday of every month at our Dallas Springs office. And it's open to anybody who wants to attend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. And Nancy, if you wouldn't mind, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy McGlasson, and I'm a mom who lost her son. And let's see, and I'm a volunteer whenever I can to help the cause of suicide and suicide prevention, and work with PJ and her group.
Thank you so much. All right, so now that we've gone through introductions, let's just get started with discussion. So the first question I really wanted to kind of put out there just to open up the topic of, these survivor of suicide loss support groups is, what is that? What is a survivor of suicide loss support group, and why do you think that they are important? And Nancy, as a survivor, I will start off with you.
The survivors of suicide loss groups were begun to help people like myself and many of you who are watching today to get help after they lose a person that they love or a person who is very close to them. So it could be a mom or a dad, it could be a neighbor, it could be a colleague from work, anyone who is going through a loss. And one of the things that we find in working with these groups is that they are different, but they're all after, especially PJ's and Mark's, because those are the two that I know the most about. They are all after helping people with an unfathomable grieving. So they're there to provide a home. And one of the best ways, if you're looking for one, if you're in Knoxville, there are two that we have right here that are great groups. But you can go to the American Foundation for the American,
AFSP, American Foundation of Suicide Prevention.
Thank you, or ASFP.org. And they have a list of hundreds in the United States. And if you just go by your zip code in Knoxville, the top two that are listed, and there are others, the top two are both free and gifts to the community. And they're the ones that are run by PJ and by Mark. So it's a home. It's a place, it's a home where you can be yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mark, PJ, do you guys have any thoughts as the facilitators on what these support groups mean to you?
I think one of the things that was very apparent to me when I was asked by the medical auxiliary to kind of take over leading the group, it had been previously led by students in the College of Social Work. And so when there was so much transition with that. And I think the big thing that we saw very quickly was, because I was leading another bereavement support group, was that individuals that have experienced a suicide definitely need their own group. We talk about the universality of this shared experience, and that this is a unique loss. All the literature out there will substantiate that, and just that I always say in group, we're not only going to deal with the complicated grief, but we've got to also deal with the trauma. And so I think that's a really important factor that is a little bit maybe more unique than that. We also think about the installation of hope when you come to a support group. And I think that installation of hope in our group and Mark's group especially comes about because I feel very fortunate that people that have used the group, and we've had a lot since 1996, but some contact me and want to come back, like Nancy and some other people that have used the group, and say, hey, I want to help. I want to be there. And I think just that tangible vision of someone that's walked the walk, they know what it's like. And so just coming to group, I think sometimes can also just be an encouragement in your healing, that you can heal. And we want people to feel that, you have a right to heal. We'll probably talk more about the complicated aspects of this grief, but I think it's important that we are part of that, and, just installation of hope, and just also just that universality of coming together with this shared experience that can bring a comfort to it as well. And they ask very unique questions there. Asking why and looking for answers is also an important part of this grief. So I think we just try to be there to accommodate just the imparting of that statement of hope, and also just let them ask the questions they need to ask.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree totally with everything PJ said. It's a good description. Yeah, I think more than anything else, human beings need to be connected with other human beings to heal emotional wounds. That's how our healing process takes place. When you cut yourself, your body knows how to mend that wound, and the same principle applies to emotional wounds. And the care of an emotional wound has to do with connecting with other people and sharing that grief or that loss, and receiving the caring understanding that people who care or who share that experience have to offer. And then, as many people find out, as Nancy found out, the ability to then turn around and give that caring to another suffering individual who maybe just has suffered that loss continues that healing process and takes you to another level of compassion for persons who have lost someone to suicide.
Thank you so much. And Mark, what would you say that people should expect when they're considering coming to a support group? What should they look for when they walk in the door?
I think the main thing is to expect to be comfortable with the people in the room, expect to be welcomed, expect to be free to share at the level that you're comfortable sharing with. You don't have to share it all if you're not in a place where you can do that. But if you are, it's important to feel comfortable to do so. It is, I think people who, particularly who have just experienced a immediate loss, have a hard time putting it into words. Yet the process of putting it into words is how the healing begins. So come and prepare to be comfortable and share at whatever level of comfort you have.
What, and this is open to anybody, but so like when someone, what is the process, the clinical process behind a support group? So is there a specific format to how they're run? Is it just free discussion? What does that look like?
I know in our group, I've been doing it a long time and did groups before that. And so I personally like what I call open agenda. And, I tell the individuals that we always say that the ones that you have that courage to walk into that group, number one. So I think you bring your agenda with you is usually the way I like to put it. Even if it's just you have questions to ask, because you're now sitting, I always tell them, you're now sitting with a group of experts because they've been walking that walk. And so I like open agenda. We bring to the floor whatever discussion. So we might start our group. We do give some guidelines for group when we first start. And I do request that nobody goes into the method. We do not talk about method. That would be too traumatizing for everybody in the group. But other than that, we have it pretty open-ended. Sometimes I'll go in with a quote or, an excerpt from something and personalize it into what kind of things they relate to in that. But I would say most often we're open agenda. And when we go around the room and introduce ourselves, people are invited then to say, I'll say, did you come in with any questions or anything that you were hoping we would talk about? And then I'll just write those down and then open agenda. And I just, for all of us, we just kind of keep the flow going from that. And you're not forced to talk. You can just listen.
Yes, the open agenda would apply to the ComPASS group as well. There are certain, just kinds of structures that we have in place to help get the meeting going and help to wind the meeting down, so that you kind of have a sense that where we are in the process. With the open agenda, there are certain very common experiences that people who have lost a loved one to suicide experience, and in those situations where people are having trouble putting it into words or even making sense of their feelings at that moment, we will talk about some of the common experiences that people have, and even some of the ways that people have dealt with it. Particularly the individuals in the room who've been further in their journey of survivor.
Yeah, and I think that ability to kind of come in, and everyone in the room can be at such different place, that having that open agenda and being able to just share, what that person is going through, even though they may be at a longer amount of time from their loss, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be at a certain level of recovery, right? So I like the idea of being able to come in where you are, and be able to just disclose or not disclose, what you're going through. The ability to sit and listen and just hear other people's perspectives seems like that would be a very healing process to someone that's having to walk through this. Nancy, do you have anything that you want to add? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Nancy. You're fine.
Sorry, y'all. It's renovation going on and there's noise. Anyway, one of the things we always have, and I'm sure that Mark has this too, is Kleenexes. Because this is a safe place. And people come, and one of the lessons that they learn from each other, and Mark was so right when he was saying people help heal each other. And being together helps each other. But there is need for the right verb here is there is need for tears at sometimes, and Kleenexes are ready. Another thing that I like about having, like is perhaps the wrong verb here, but I appreciate about these groups is that there are people who are 20 years out and maybe 30 years out. And as we've been saying, maybe a few weeks. I mean, how brave are they to come in? I couldn't even say the word suicide without crying for about 6 months. So, but they come in and they find that commonality of terrible grief, and they're able to help each other. And the more recent ones get just as much help from the older survivors of suicide, though the most, I have to say, the wisdom in the room comes from the leaders like Mark and PJ.
Thank you so much for your input. I oftentimes wonder, what are those commonalities? Mark had mentioned that there are commonalities between individuals that have experienced suicide loss. And, what could that be? What are some of those common things that you hear, and maybe questions that people come in with to a support group? What are the most common things that you guys hear?
I think one of the major things that definitely we see is just people seeking that explanation of why. And so often, I've had many stories over the years where, individuals have been told, very quickly up front, like, well, just don't ask why. It's just, you're never going to know. But in order, that's just such a normative factor of our human condition, isn't it? We want to understand and we want to know why. And so this is a really important part of your grieving process. We're not going to shut that off, and I think people, we talk about that in group, that we come to our own conclusions of what this is about. Now, of course, also we give you the information from like American Association of Suicidology and some of the think tanks that provide the research and help us in understanding some of the, contributing factors. We want to also make sure that we give correct information. And William Schneidman's work, I mean, just we like to provide that as well, because what we want to also help do is address this erroneous assignment of guilt and blame. And so I think that part is really important, to be able to just ask why. And I know I'll be quiet after this, but another biggie is always, almost the first time I know clients will meet me is, am I crazy? And so we quickly address that as well, because, you're trying to make sense out of a senseless, situation here. And so it doesn't fit any kind of nice, neat formula. And so we talk about, given the situation that we're in, some of these feelings and experiences that we have, again, the universality of this experience helps people feel more assured as well that, what they're going through. So the guilt and the blame and asking the why and wondering about some of those are a few of the things, and I'll let others speak now.
I mean, PJ hit on it. I mean, most people are telling themselves or asking themselves, I should have done something to stop it. I should have known. And dealing with that question is probably the kind of the most common and difficult piece of the work that survivors have to do. It's very, very difficult to unpack that. And people inevitably spend a great deal of time inventorying the last experiences and reliving those experiences and trying to rewrite the past. And you can't, to say to them that that's not possible, that's useless. It really kind of interferes with the work. I mean, I really think that's part of what people have to do. Is to walk back through that. Ultimately, we all know you can't rewrite the past, and that's what makes being a survivor and the survivor journey and sharing that so powerful, because it's one thing for someone like myself who is approaching this from an academic or understanding. It's another thing for people who have lived through the experience and come out the other side and have resolved those questions for themselves. There is a peace with the whole process that can't be conveyed in words. It's more conveyed by that the presence of those individuals.
And Mark, I really appreciate what you're saying too, because I know from my perspective, when I go out into the community, I could just be going there to these different locations thinking that I'm going to do a QPR when this community has been touched by a suicide, and they are still working through. They're working through that process. They're working through that. What could I have done? I should have done something different. They are working through that guilt as well, even though it might not be a direct relationship with the individual. That entire community is still kind of processing that. So I know from my perspective, giving them the space is huge. Just giving them the space to be able to communicate, how they're feeling makes a big impact in that area. So I see that in trainings, and I've seen it with other individuals throughout the state as well. Like that's very much a needed opportunity to share and talk about.
Absolutely, the space and something you touched on earlier, the time. Our society, in general, likes instant results, and this is something you cannot hurry. And one of the other common themes that we hear in support groups is nobody wants to hear me talk about this anymore. Everybody's saying, "Why aren't you over this now?" And more than any other kind of grief, loss of a loved one by suicide takes a long time to unwind. It takes a long time to process. And you can't hurry it. So space and time and understanding.
I would add to these overarching huge topics that we're discussing, that there are also practical things that people come to a group like this. And we hear, PJ and I worked on a list one time of the top 10 questions that people ask, and it's probably the top 400. But things like, when will I ever sleep again? I remember when my son died, I didn't sleep for a week, and that made me even weirder than usual. Another thing is, how am I going to celebrate my son's birthday or my daughter's or my friends? And holidays, we're coming to Halloween, we're coming to Christmas, Hanukkah, we're coming to Martin Luther King Day, we're coming to, all of the Thanksgiving. Did I mention Thanksgiving? And it's hard for people to be thankful that first Thanksgiving because they're either sad or mad, or they're certainly not glad, but they work because of their other families and friends. But they're also, one of the questions Mark just made me think of too, is people will say, seriously hoping for an answer. And I asked the same question, how long will this take? Because we really don't know. And saying to people, it will happen in your own time. And it could be a year and it could be 20. And another thing that people wonder about is friends. And do you lose or do you use friends? Some friends can't handle the fact that they have lost someone to suicide, and then other friends want to help and do everything they possibly can. We don't want to abuse that friendship, but we sure are appreciative of it. So they're just practical things. The last one that I would just throw out too, that people don't want to know about, but I've seen groups address this, and it's important, is people's health. Whether it's their physical health, go to your doctor, be checked. If you're not sleeping 4 weeks later, really go to your doctor immediately. And also your mental health. And people, our society still, it's doing better. It's doing better. Stigma has decreased, but it still exists. And so none of us want to admit that we are unhappy ourselves, or that we are having trouble dealing with this loss. So physical and mental health are often addressed within the group too. And I think it's helpful to people to hear other people are going, so you're not sleeping either. So maybe you're depressed. Okay, so what are you doing about it? It's a place where they can be open.
What you touched on too, and I've found to be really true. Having those conversations with either family members or friends about the loss of a loved one can be very tricky and difficult to navigate. So having a place where you can go to, like these support groups where, there are people that have been there before, have had those conversations. I know a lot of times you don't get the response from the person that you're talking to that you would expect, or maybe you get a response that's almost painful to hear. When you go to that support group, it's nice to know that there are other people there that have experienced the same thing and can kind of help you process through that. Because the law, I feel like that just adds on additional, like you're already going through the pain of a loss and then the trauma with it being associated to suicide. And now you're having difficulty with family, difficulty with friends, having these conversations. It just can make it more of a more difficult thing to walk through. So to be able to go to a group of people that have been there and understand and get it, it kind of takes some of that burden off of your shoulders. And that I'm crazy thought process. Am I crazy? I think can come from some of those types of things. So definitely some very, great points. There, at one point, someone had mentioned, fears and reservations of groups, and this will be kind of like our last topic. But what are some of those kind of common fears or reservations of joining a survivor of suicide loss support group? And you guys have all seen people overcome those fears and reservations. But what does that take? What are the fears and reservations, and what does it really take to overcome?
One of the things that, we see a lot, and people have said, it's really hard to walk into that group, because when you walk into that group, it makes it real that I'm in this group. And I think that's one of the big things. And I think another thing is that we are a very avoidant society. It's like, hurry up, get busy, distract, go to pleasure, don't think about it, all those myths that, if we just don't think about it, we're going to be okay. So what we do in a group actually is we are creating a safe place, but we sit with our pain. And so I think we meet ourselves where we're at. And so I think those things can be very overwhelming to think about walking into a group where that is the purpose of that group. So I think identifying with, this is really real, this is what happens, and I'm going to sit with my pain. And I know there's other things that, that probably Mark and Nancy want to speak to.
I think the greatest fear, and this is the one that I hope those of you who are watching this video hear, I think the greatest fear is it's not going to help. And that's what keeps people from coming. And if that is something that you're thinking about, and that is your fear, we just absolutely encourage you to give it a try. It can help.
Yeah, I think they all kind of come from that same place, right? There's like a fear of addressing what has happened, right? So we avoid, we don't want to cross into that area of what, what is this going to mean? What am I committing to right now? Do I really have to face this? Do I really have to face this beast? But you're absolutely right, Mark. And as soon as you take that one step, it helps to be able to take more steps. Nancy, do you have anything that you want to share about, the fears of support groups and overcoming those fears?
Emily is aware that I actively fought against going to a support group for about 8 or 9 months, and was finally tricked into it by a friend who told me that someone needed help. And as we walked in the door, she said, "You're the person who needs help, Nancy." And she was kinder than that, but it did take, the vaccination did take. But I knew that we were going to talk about this, so I made a quick list of, just off the top of my head, why I didn't want to go. I didn't want to cry in front of strangers. I didn't want people who might know I was in a support group to think I was even stranger than they already thought I was. A single mom who can't save her son. The group, by the way, helped me get past this self-understanding, which was hopefully incorrect. Mightn't people not respect me if they knew I needed support from strangers? Plus, I was already going to a therapist and she could help me, so I didn't need other people. And I was independent and could handle this grief myself. I had always handled every problem in my life myself, and I would handle this one. I was denying the fact that this was undeniably the most difficult experience of my life, and that help would be a good thing. Getting help, though, might mean that I was weak, not only sad. And as a professional woman, I didn't want people to think I was weak, because then they might not trust me. They might not ask me to be on this committee I wanted to be on, whatever. I didn't want to be weak. And really, who wants to sit around with a group of people who are also sad? How is that going to help me feel better? And what could these people possibly teach me? I've been going through this for 8 months. This is what was in my head. And I had sort of learned what a horrible thing it was. What could I possibly learn at this group? Those were some of the reasons why I wasn't going. As you can see, though, I went, and I still go after 23 years. And I can share, if you want, Emily, some of the reasons why I still go. And no one makes me go. This is not a trick. I am going, I'm not going to say happily, but I'm going because it's something that's important to me. First, I go because the people who attend these support group meetings are so brave to enter that room. And every time I go, they teach me something. I, who was wondering what could they possibly teach me, 23 years later, am still learning from this experience. Second, they help me, the people in that room help me remember why I'm a writer. And I'm a writer because I don't want another mother, another friend, another cousin to have to go through this experience again. Now, that's a big goal to have for a book. But the people in this room help me remember what is important to pass on to others, so that maybe we can not only help survivors, but so that we can maybe even stop suicide ideation at least some of the time. Let's do that. And they remind me what that words are important. And last, almost last, if there's some little something that I can do for somebody, I want to go and do that, because so many people helped me. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of the group that I've been attending, and of the fact that there are 2 in Knoxville. We're so very, very fortunate. To me, I think that love, understanding, and forgiveness grow most when they're given away. And that's exactly what happens in an SOS, in a survivors of suicide group. Every member gives and exemplifies love, understanding, and forgiveness, and gives that to other people in the group. And we're all strengthened by that. So that's why I still go.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I look forward to hearing your answer, and how you have really been able over time to be able to not only address your personal loss, but be able to be there and help and facilitate other individuals that are going through the same thing. There were 2 things that really popped out to me when you were talking, and one of them was that those protective factors, right? You touched on how you had a therapist, you had a counselor. What else could this provide? And I say this a lot of times in trainings, and when I'm talking to people, therapy and counseling is only one small brick in that wall of protective factors that we can provide, right? So peer support groups, there are other things that we can incorporate into helping people in suicide prevention or in postvention when they're trying to overcome the loss. And then the other one that I wanted to just touch on was postvention is prevention. So, really helping people not only overcome their loss, but understand, that there are things that we can do to prevent suicide. That's a big thing that TSPN has stood on for a long time. All postvention is also prevention. So I appreciate your remarks, Nancy, and PJ and Mark. Thank you so much for joining us. That was all the questions that I had for the discussion. It was really great, and thank you again for joining me. And I hope that all of you out there watching gleaned something from these groups. There will be text information on the website to guide you into how to join a support group. So please look for that, and thank you.
Thank you.